Okay, fifth subtopic, which is on constructive and destructive interference. For this subtopic, you have to be able to define what is coherence, state the conditions for interference of light, and lastly, state the conditions of constructive and destructive interference for in-phase and anti-phase sources. Okay, so for this part, you have to emphasize on the path difference and its equivalence to phase difference. So this subtopic as well do not have any calculation. Basically just have to state and define. Okay, so ni UPS question lah, most probably. Okay, so interference is defined as the effect of interaction between two or more waves which overlaps or superpose at a point and at a particular time from the sources. When two light waves meet at a point, a bright or dark region will be produced due to the interference of waves in accordance to the principle of superposition. So what is the principle of superposition? The principle of superposition states that the resultant displacement at any point will be the vector sum of the displacements due to the two light waves. Okay, so are the two types of interference, constructive and destructive. What is coherence? Coherence means that the sources will have the same wavelength or frequency ataupun they have a constant phase difference between them. So graphically, this is what a coherent waves mean. It is more uniform, okay, ataupun dia lagi arranged more neatly in comparison to incoherent waves. So there are two types of coherent waves. One is in phase, one is anti-phase, which is out of phase lah. So in phase meaning both sources start with crest ataupun trough, and then anti-phase is one of the sources would start with crest and the other one would start with trough. At starting point, these sources have a phase difference of pi. So this phase difference of pi is equal to ataupun equivalent. It is equivalent to lambda over 2, half of a wavelength. Okay, so dorang punya phase difference is just half of a wavelength. So what are the conditions for interference of light? So for a permanent interference to take place, the sources should be coherent. Okay, and then next, the source should be monochromatic, meaning that the light is the source is a single wavelength, ada satu wavelength saja. The third one, the light waves that are interfering must have the same ataupun approximately the same amplitude. The same ataupun approximately ataupun the same amplitude to obtain total cancellation at minimum or to obtain a good contrast at maximum. Okay, and lastly, the distance between these sources should be as small as possible relative to the light wavelength. Okay, so it cannot be greater than the light punya wavelength. Right, so path difference. Path difference, delta L, is the difference in distances traveled by the two light waves meeting at a point. So delta L ni adalah this one here. So this is delta L. It has an equivalence to the phase difference, which is delta phi lah. So lambda, path difference lambda will equal to the phase difference of 2 pi. So maksudnya kalau lambda is equal to 2 pi, a phase difference of pi would be equal to lambda over 2. So that they are equivalent in that kind of way lah. Okay, so the path difference decides whether a constructive ataupun destructive interference will occur when they arrive at a point. Okay, so di sinilah point dia tu. So the conditions for constructive and destructive interference, if both the sources are if S1 and S2 are two coherent sources and they start in phase, for a constructive interference to occur, the path difference will be differed by an integral number of wavelengths delta L m lambda. So these two light waves ni akan arrive at B in phase and will give rise to a constructive interference. Okay, so yang ni dorang punya path difference is R2 minus R1, basically this one, 2 lambda, And then they differ by an integral number of wavelengths, which is this one here. Untuk destructive interference pula, they differ by integral number of this value here, this formula here. So these two light waves arrives at C. Oh, this is C. Arrives at C, 180 degree out of phase, ataupun pi. Pi kan? Pi out phase difference dia pi lah, out of phase, and give rise to destructive interference. So this is destructive interference, this is constructive interference. But you should know that not all sources are always in phase. If the sources, two coherent sources, are out of phase, they will equivalent to lambda over 2. So they will have a path ataupun have a phase difference of pi lah, which is equivalent to lambda over 2. So they tidak start in phase. Okay, so the initial difference between the two coherent sources need to be taken into consideration. So untuk condition for constructive interference, this is how you calculate it, and then this is for destructive interference. But in this subtopic, there isn't any calculation based on the learning outcomes lah. Okay, so this is just a summary of the conditions for constructive and destructive interference. Right, so that is all for the fifth subtopic.